In example 4 here, this time we're going to try to build our equations. So what we have to do is take a look at our question, rip it apart, and plug it all into our equation here. So the first thing I notice is it mentions that there's a vertical asymptote at x equals -1. So all vertical asymptotes, by the way, are always found in your denominator. So vertical asymptote in denominator. All horizontal asymptotes, so it says here horizontal asymptotes of y equals 1. All horizontal asymptotes are always a combination of a numerator over a denominator of some sort. So we might want to leave that to the end to figure out because it's a fraction statement that got us to this one. PODs we're always looking at a POD. It says here 2 and 4/3. So basically the only thing we need from the POD is our x value. So POD, we only need the x value. That y value will help us check, so we're going to keep that in mind, but really it's the x value that's going to help build our equation. Let's plug in as many of these as possible into our equation. So we got y equals, here's my line. Vertical asymptote of x equals -1, so that means in my denominator I'm going to have x plus 1 in my denominator. If I have a POD, my POD is going to be at 2, so that's x minus 2 in the denominator here. X minus 2 stacked right on top of it, so eventually we can cancel those out. Here, if I wanted to build, and it looks like a horizontal asymptote of 1, I need the same x value on top of another x value. So here, once these cancel out for POD, I'm left with this here, x plus 1. I'm probably going to have another x right here, because x over x is going to get me to that 1 value. It's going to be x, and I notice here that this is x squared minus a. That's called difference of squares. If I already have minus sign here, I'm going to need a plus sign here, so I'm going to go plus a right here. I'm going to sub in this 4/3, this POD value after quote unquote I cleaned up the equation. I'm going to sub it in to see what my value for a is. So if I had a y value of 4/3, that's going to be equal to, my POD was 2 by the way, so it's going to be 2 plus a, and all of that's divided by 2 plus 1. Well, I'm going to clean this up here. So we got 4 over 3. That's going to be equal to 2 plus a, still all divided by 3. Well, I know that 3 equals 3 in the denominator, 4 equals 2 plus a in my numerator. So to make my numerator the same, to make it become 4, a has to be 2. So I'm going to write therefore a has to equal 2. So right now I have more than enough information to write down my new equation. So my final equation should be y equals x plus 2, x minus 2. All of that's going to be divided by x plus 1 and x minus 2. And I don't want to cancel anything out in this case here, only because I want to multiply it out and get it back to function over function. So when I multiply this all out, I end up with x squared, and 2 times -2 is going to be -4. In my denominator here, I have x squared minus x minus 2, and that follows the same format here, x squared minus bx minus c. And to finalize this question, it's asking you what's a, b, and c all added up. So a, and I'm not looking for the negative sign in this case, I'm just looking for the number. A is 4, b so happens to be the number 1 in front of x there, and c was the number 2. So my final answer, once I summed it all up, I should be the number 7. In the next example, again, we're going to do something similar where we have to take a look at our equation and kind of build it. So here, let's start off with y equals. I know that I have x plus b, that's probably going to be my POD because that's going to cancel out. So I'm going to look for, in my question, POD is right here, it's at -1. So I'm going to have x plus 1 over x plus 1. I know that my vertical asymptote of x equals 4 has to be in the denominator. That's going to be my x minus 4. So right away, I know my b values, 1 and 1, and my d value, 4. or x minus d, which is x minus 4. My c value, we haven't really talked about this, but the only other piece of information that's in this question was our x-intercept. All x-intercepts are found in your numerator, so we're going to go x plus 2, so that once we flip that over, it's going to become x equals negative 2. The only variable left that we're still missing is my a value. Well, to figure out my a value, again, I'm going to sub in my POD. So let's just do that. So if I subbed in my POD of negative 4 over 5, that's going to be equal to, and again, our x plus 1s are going to cancel eventually, a, and we have, oh, my POD was negative 1, so it's going to be negative 1 plus 2 here. All of that's divided by negative 1 minus 4 down here. If I clean this up here, I got negative 4 over 5. That's equal to a. 2 plus negative 1 is just 1 there, so that's going to just be a in my numerator. I have negative 5 in my denominator. To match it up, I can easily move my negative sign here down to my denominator there. Now I have negative 5 in denominator. 4 equals a times 1, and so of course a has to be 4. So now I have my final equation. I'm going to rewrite it, so I have a final equation of y equals 4 x plus 1 x plus 2 x plus 1 again, and the x minus 4. And right here, this question is asking you what's the value for a, b, c, d. So I'm going to list off a, b, c, d. So a, b, c, and d. And I'm just listing off the numbers there. So a should be 4, b should have been 1, c is 2, and d should be 4 as well. So this here basically is the basis of a numerical response question, where if you had to fill in a grid, it'd be 4, 1, 2, and 4 in a numerical response box. In the last example here, this time here, we're going to build our equations based off of the graph. So I'm going to pull as much information off my graph as possible to build it. So the very first thing I'm going to look at are my asymptotes. So I have a vertical asymptote here at, that's at x equals negative 2. I have a horizontal asymptote here, and that's at y equals 1. And I have a POD definitely right here. I can't read the y value, but I can read the x value. So I have a POD, and that's going to be at x equals negative 8. I also try to read other coordinates that I can more or less read. I have a x-intercept right here. So that's negative 4 comma 0 x-intercept, and I have a y-intercept right here that's at 0 comma 2, and so I can definitely read those coordinates, so I'm going to use that somewhere in my equation. So in my equation, I'm going to set up as y equals, let's start off with our vertical asymptote first. Vertical was at x equals negative 2, so I'm going to have an x plus 2 in my denominator. I also had a POD. The POD was at negative 8, so I'm going to have it right beside x plus 8 and an x plus 8 to stack it so that we can eventually cancel out to make our POD. We had an x-intercept, and that x-intercept was at negative 4, so I'm going to have x plus 4 right here. And more or less, this should be good. We don't know what stretch factor we have, so let's put it a value just in case we might have a stretch factor. So I'm going to put an a value right here, and we do want to solve to find that a value to double check if we have a stretch factor or not. The only piece of information I haven't used is that y-intercept, so that's what I'm going to use to find a. So I'm going to say 2 is equal to a, and every single x here is now going to be 0, by the way. So this is now 4. These would cancel out because they're PODs. And then down here would just be 2. This is x plus 2, which is 0 plus 2. Here, 4 divided by 2 is just 2. So I got 2 equals 2a. So then, therefore, a has to equal 1. So my final equation, of course, is just y equals x plus 4 over x plus 2. And then we had the x plus 8 and another x plus 8. Done. On our next example, again, we're going to do the exact same thing. Let's take a look at our graph, pull off as much information as possible. Vertical asymptote right away, x equals -8. Another vertical asymptote, x equals -2. Doesn't look like we have any horizontal asymptotes. It does curve away at the end here, but because this middle section here goes right through and it looks continuous, definitely no horizontal intercept, or sorry, no horizontal asymptote. So I'm going to write down really quickly, no horizontal asymptote off to the side there just to keep track. Looking at my graphs here, no circles anywhere. So that means no PODs anywhere. So what else can I pull off of this graph? I know I have an x-intercept right there. That's -4, 0. I have another one right here. So I have two x-intercepts, by the way. So that's at -1, 0. Do I have a y-intercept? Yes, I do. But that one's going to be tough to kind of guess. So I'm going to leave that one alone. So going into our equation to try to build our equation, let's go y equals. My denominator is going to be my two vertical asymptotes. So I have x plus 8 for the first one, x plus 2 for the second one. And then I had two x-intercepts up top. And so the first one was going to be x plus 4. And the second one is x plus 1. And here, that's more or less everything I can pull off of my graph here for an equation. That should be our final answer. For both questions, I should check on my graphing calculator just to double check. But for now, I know I am absolutely right and I'm good to go. If you have any questions about today's lesson, please ask. We'll see you in class.